My name is Carah Ong, and I am the Research and Communications Director for the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation that's based in Santa Barbara, California. And the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation is a nonprofit education and advocacy organization that has status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Ballistic missile defense that includes both national missile defense and theater missile defense are called they're called defensive measures for the United States to protect itself from incoming intercontinental ballistic missiles that would be sent by states antagonistic to the United States. The term Star Wars was dubbed during the Reagan administration in the 1980s. President Reagan at the time had a grandiose vision called the Strategic Defense Initiative. And the initiative was an anti-missile system that would incorporate space-based lasers and space-based interceptors in order to intervene any incoming intercontinental ballistic missiles. And so it was also seen as a way of militarizing and weaponizing outer space, and it was seen that the arms race that was happening with the former Soviet Union would then also be moved into outer space, so it was called Star Wars. Vandenberg Air Force Base is the site of the National Missile Defense Interceptor tests. An intercontinental ballistic missile is launched from Vandenberg, and an interceptor containing a kill vehicle is launched from Kwajalein Atoll, and the two are meant to intercept over the Pacific Ocean. Vandenberg is the site of the 30th Space Wing, and so they are working with United States Space Command in developing technologies that will be used and incorporated in the National Missile Defense System specifically. I became interested in this issue in 1999 when it was shortly after the United States Space Command had released some military documents outlining their plans for outer space. And it was also the time of the first interceptor test of the National Missile Defense System, which is located at Vandenberg. So I saw a personal opportunity to get involved in the issue and to be able to practice my First Amendment rights in opposing the military framework and also this specific system by voicing my opinion out at Vandenberg. And I also knew that there were actions done earlier, and so I attempted to contact protesters from the 1980s who are still local and to hopefully re-engage them in being able to voice an opinion out at Vandenberg. These systems are actually a Trojan horse for the United States to weaponize and militarize outer space in order to maintain its military superiority. I think that citizens everywhere, not just in the U.S. but also internationally, should be concerned about the deployment of any missile defense system because of the geopolitical consequences of deploying such a system. Russia and China have threatened that this will cause new arms races, both nuclear and conventional, if the United States moves forward with plans. Also, a large amount of our military spending is going to be put towards the missile defenses, which could be appropriated to other programs, social programs such as healthcare and education, programs that are really lacking both here in the United States and around the world. And also the system promotes missile defenses promote a system of fear and oppression that the military infrastructure has been based on. And I think that we need to oppose this because we need to fundamentally redefine security in terms of human environmental needs rather than military superiority. I think that it's very important for people to be actively involved in nonviolent civil disobedience and in demonstrating out at the military base, particularly on Star Wars, because we have the First Amendment right to do so. In many countries that's not possible, and it is our right as citizens to raise public awareness about this issue so that others can know why we're out there. And there's not just one military perspective that's being presented in trying to sell this missile defense. I think that our opinions are equally important. And I think that by demonstrating out at Vandenberg Air Force Base about this issue, I think that we're able to raise awareness in the local community and nationally and internationally about what's going on and what the true plans behind missile defenses are. This money could be better spent on social programs that are lacking here in the United States, including healthcare, social services, and education. These social programs in the United States are often underfunded. We have a lot of children in the United States living below the poverty line, and this is money that could be better reappropriated to these programs. Additionally, missile defense, although I don't like to use this argument, is technologically not feasible at this time. And so we're wasting billions of dollars on a program that is not going to work. And I think that just undermines the sheer folly of deploying such a system. And in terms of misspending American tax dollars. And I think it's the duty of American citizens who pay tax money to say that they want their tax dollars to be put into other programs. The main beneficiaries of missile defense deployment are the defense contractors who are contracted to build the various components of the missile defense system. And I believe that the Department of Defense and the military also benefits greatly from this. The main people that suffer are, American citizens whose tax dollars are being spent on missile defenses. And I believe around the world, the main countries that would suffer would be Russia and China, whose countries may engage in arms races, and also other countries who would suffer from regional arms races, such as India and Pakistan, and also in the Middle East, including Israel and Egypt and other Arab states. I think that any time where the result will be another arms race, that means that more money is going to be appropriated to arms buildup and be diverted from social programs and from helping the people. I think a much better approach to countering nuclear proliferation and to countering threats from quote-unquote rogue states or states of concern would be for the United States to take a lead in the negotiations on a nuclear weapons convention that would prohibit the development of nuclear weapons, the further development of nuclear weapons and nuclear arsenals, and would also ban existing nuclear arsenals, as well as it would include verification measures to ensure that the process was underway in not only the United States but in other countries. Other intermediate measures that could also be part of this leading up to a nuclear weapons convention could include ballistic missile disarmament, or could include a ban on missile flight tests, and also the strengthening of the missile technology control regime in order to stop further development of technology at this point. It's very difficult to put the genie back in the bottle, but there are steps that can be taken towards the route to ultimately secure the complete elimination of nuclear weapons. During the 80s, there was a perceived threat that we were going to be annihilated if a nuclear war occurred. And I think that at the end of the Cold War, with the fall of the Soviet Union, in the minds of American citizens at least, that threat dissipated. That we felt that we were no longer going to be annihilated by nuclear war, and that there was no longer a threat from the former Soviet Union and Russia. And I think that perception is inappropriate. I think that it still is a very valid threat that we could be attacked by nuclear weapons, not necessarily from Russia, but there is a case of accidental nuclear war taking place, and there are an enormous amount of nuclear stockpiles around the world, and there is not a need for this existence. But I think that in the 1990s, I think that as American citizens, or as young people at least, we have forgotten that nuclear weapons exist. I saw a connection between nuclear weapons and between missile defense and between globalization, because nuclear weapons and missile defense is part of a broader military infrastructure that has kept the world in its current state in terms of a system of fear and oppression that have caused these other issues to occur. And so for me, I wanted to be involved in part of the root of the problem and hopefully find answers to the root of the problem as a means of also working with people who are in the globalization movement or who are in other issues. I think that the role of young people in the United States is very important in terms of stopping nuclear weapons and power in space, because the future that they threaten is ours, and it's our responsibility to stand up and voice our opinions about this now before it goes any further, and it's our responsibility to stop it, because if we don't, who's going to? In order to engage young people on the ballistic missile defense issue in particular, and also on nuclear weapons abolition, I think we need to make the arguments very valid to what's going on in the world today, and also to make the connection to the issues that are important to young people, such as education, such as the globalization issues, and somehow connect to them on what they believe or what they find important. And so we need to make a valid point about what is going on today. And I think that those who don't think it's important, well, to those people, I think that there are arguments in terms of just rational arguments about how much money we're spending on this. In the United States spends more on its military than the next 12 nations combined. We can begin to have a paradigm shift, if we can change the way that people think and the way that we define security. If we can begin that process now, I think that is very important, and eventually we will achieve the world that we're trying to create. The nuclear issue and the ballistic missile defense issue has extreme importance to both people of color and to disaffected communities, and also to indigenous people. Primarily where military bases are located, where nuclear testing is done, is historically on indigenous land, and has historically affected communities that are less fortunate. And so I think this issue greatly affects them, and I think that a way to get them involved is to share and educate them on these issues and give them a voice, because their voice needs to be heard. I think that we need to go to them and not tell them what they need to do, but listen to them and find out how their communities have been affected. And I think that we can be a means by which they can speak their voice and talk about what's happening. And I think that once we hear what's happening to their communities, I think that we will have a better understanding of the issue and how deeply it goes and affects people. There are many issues, many indigenous issues that are at play at Vandenberg Air Force Base. Vandenberg is located on sacred Chumash land. It's seen as the western gate into the afterlife. And so it is a very spiritual land that is sacred to many people. And on that same land, they are testing national missile defense. They're also doing other tests at Vandenberg. And this is basically just one example of the historical role that indigenous land has played in the military. You know, many indigenous peoples have been affected through uranium mining and through nuclear waste sites. There's a similar struggle going on at Yucca Mountain, because the United States government wants to make a permanent nuclear repository there, and Yucca Mountain is on indigenous land. Also at Vandenberg Air Force Base, there's several types of military toxics that are there and that are polluting the sacred indigenous land that is so important. Kwajalein Atoll has been contracted by the United States government through the Marshall Islands because it has the largest lagoon in the world, and so the United States has been using that as a site for many years as a missile range facility to test its missiles, and it is now where the interceptor is launched to intercept the intercontinental ballistic missile that's launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base for the missile defense program. The people who initially inhabited Kwajalein Atoll were kicked off of their land and relocated elsewhere. And now the people that were indigenous to the land actually go in and serve the United States military that is based there locally. There has been serious environmental damage that has been done because the intercontinental ballistic missiles land actually in the lagoon on the island, and the land there has been contaminated through testing over many years. So there's both social and environmental consequences of using that land. There is some resistance at Kwajalein Atoll itself. and also in the Marshall Islands, but primarily the indigenous movement in the Pacific has been headed up by the Pacific Concerns Resource Center, which is based in Fiji. And so they have been working primarily on this Kwajalein issue. But because the indigenous people don't actually no longer live on Kwajalein Atoll, there is not resistance on the atoll itself, aside from some protesting in which people have tried to infiltrate the atoll. The media plays a large role in nonviolent, peaceful demonstrations at Vandenberg Air Force Base because it gives us as activists the opportunity to raise public awareness about this issue and also to voice our opinion and our opposition to what's happening at Vandenberg Air Force Base and with the broader issues of ballistic missile defense and nuclear disarmament. I think that the first step in empowering other people on ballistic missile defense is education, and that can be done through several media. I think that we primarily need to focus on younger people because this affects them, and we need to be getting into schools and onto university and college campuses. Also, our foundation has just published a book called A Maginot Line in the Sky, bringing together international perspectives of over 18 contributors on this issue. And I think that publishing books and newsletters on this issue is a great way of developing education about the issue. I think also that the internet is extremely important in the future of activism because so many young people are on the internet constantly now, and because it can easily capture their attention. I think that we need to be focusing on that also as a media which we can use. And also through education we can then empower citizens to act on this issue, because I believe personally that education and knowledge about an issue implies responsibility to do something about it. And I believe that through education that people will become more involved and want to do something such as civil disobedience or participate in a nonviolent peaceful demonstration on this issue. While the stated purpose of ballistic missile defense is to protect the United States from an incoming intercontinental ballistic missile, it is becoming ever apparent through military reports that in actuality the ballistic missile defense is part of a broader scheme and to militarize and weaponize outer space. And I believe that ballistic missile defense perpetuates a military system that's based on fear and oppression. And I think that as citizens we need to voice our opinion to say that we need to fundamentally redefine our security that's based on human and environmental needs rather than security that's based on military superiority. As a United States citizen, I am frightened of what our government wants to do in terms of militarizing and weaponizing outer space and in terms of wanting to conduct a war. It seriously concerns me because I don't think that it represents that the majority of citizens in the United States wants. And it concerns me even more that our government is continuing to act outside of the will of the people through whom that they get their authority. And it also concerns me because of the international repercussions that will occur. And I am personally against what the government and the military is doing. And I hope that other people will stand up and voice their opinion about it as well.